On paper, UFC Vegas 100 was not a very good card. It honestly kind of sucked. And then come weigh-ins, it got even worse. I broke down this card on Sunday, and we had 14 fights to talk about. Come fight night tonight, we only had 11. But that didn't stop this card from delivering. Overall, UFC Vegas 100 was a fantastic fight card. We had an enormous amount of finishes. We had a couple of really good back and forth wars. And overall, it was a very successful night. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks. And I'm going to recap the entire UFC Vegas 100 fight card. Before we talk about the fights, let's talk about the bets. And if you watch this video week in and week out, then you are used to me showing winning bets. It is insane. The absolute heater we are on is unprecedented. In a world where everybody is complaining about too many favorites have won, too many underdogs are winning, the judges keep screwing us, Jakey Boy and I continue to show up week in and week out and give you winning bets. Tonight, I gave you a 26% return on your investment. Actually, I gave you a 23% return on your investment from my bets. Jacob gave you 28 on his, so 26% return on your investment overall. We gave you a couple units of net profit. The safety parlay hit for the 6th event in a row. 4 of those 6 were plus money. We're on a heater. And if you want to unlock all the picks, the bets, and everything else for UFC 309, you can do so now. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. We also had the best DraftKings ownership projections on the planet. If you play DraftKings Fantasy, you know how important these numbers are. And our margin of error was 3.27%. The next closest was 4.11. That is a giant gap in this world. We're beating the roto grinders, the Awesomes, the companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars to put into their product, and we're over here smacking them around with a $10 product. And finally, before we talk about the fights, I usually hit this slide in my sales pitch, right? And I said, you're going to get even more than just me and Jacob. You're going to get Artem too. Artem picked a perfect card. There was 11 fights, and he picked all 11 correctly, including Gaston Bolanos. So if you do want to unlock all of Artem's picks and bets, my picks and bets, Jacob's picks and bets, the artificial intelligence, you can do so now. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member. It's freaking $10 for an entire month. That month is going to get you UFC 309, UFC China, a whole month. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. It's fucking $10. Let's talk about these fights. Right off the rip, the base of the safety parlay, we had Melissa Mullins, and she smoked Klaudia Sygula. Klaudia Sygula sucks. She sucks. She showed up here undefeated, essentially. Shows up, supposed to be this Russian. I did all the tape study, or Polish, I'm sorry. I did all the tape study, and I was like, she's kind of a shitty striker, and she'll do some jiu-jitsu off her back. And then the announcers, the commentary team is talking about, she wants to get this to the ground. She's a great grappler. It's like, what? What tape study did you watch that she's a great grappler who wants to get this to the ground? So I was pretty confident Melissa Mullins was going to get it done. Jacob helped me get even more confident. I started this week by saying, I don't know if I'm going to do a safety parlay. I was nervous. I had a bunch of bets on the board. We'll talk about some of them, but I had the UFC newcomers already bet. I had Gillian Robertson already bet. I had all these people already bet, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do a safety parlay. And then the stars aligned. We did a little more research. While breaking down the fights, it became more and more clear that Klaudia is a bit of a fraud. So I was like, all right, I will put Melissa Mullins in the safety parlay. And then we'll talk about the second half of Elizeu Zaleski. But Melissa Mullins looked pretty good. Did she look spectacular? No. Did she look like she deserved a black belt? I don't know. Probably not, honestly. It's always funny when the coaches give their fighters black belts after their wins, because she didn't really use jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, of course, she had some control, but really, she got a takedown, and the other girl sucks. And they brought the black belt with them, right? That coach had the black belt with him. Melissa must have known. So if Melissa loses, does she not get a black belt? Like, the skills that she had that morning, that they were like, she has earned a black belt. Those skills are still in that human being. But if she loses, she's not a black belt? Only if she wins? What if she won by knockout? What if there wasn't a single takedown and she just landed one punch, knocked her out? Does she still get a black belt? It's always weird when they do that. I always think that's so stupid. But whatever. Melissa got her black belt. Here's a little inside tip. Jacob, his original underdog lock of the week was Cody Garbrandt, right? That fight dropped. So then at the last minute, he's like, listen, I'll do you a favor. I'll give you a wild plus money bet. We'll call it lock of the week. And he did Melissa Mullins by submission. And it was looking pretty good for a while there, plus 600. So he was messaging me and he was like, let's see if we can help influence this. So he was DMing Melissa. Hey, Melissa, let's see if we can get this black belt. You could definitely submit her, Melissa. And for a while there, it looked like that was going to work. But ultimately, she got the TKO. Then we have a return of Tresean Gore. This was the only underdog that I bet on that I got wrong. I bet on Antonio Trocoli. Dude's humongous. 6'6" or whatever the hell he is. He's big for this weight class. Tresean Gore hasn't fought in years. Barely has any fights whatsoever. I thought Antonio Trocoli could do well. And we didn't really have enough time to see. Like, there was a little bit of back and forth. He didn't look awful. He didn't look great. And ultimately, Tresean Gore got that head, got that guillotine. They made a huge deal about that guillotine. It's the same one that he got Josh Friend with 2 years ago. But then he did talk about himself. He's like, I submit black belts with this guillotine in practice. I've been training this forever. I don't know how good Tresean Gore is. I just don't know. Because this could be Antonio Trocoli sucks. That's what this could be. What I will say is Tresean Gore's takedown, beautiful. Beautiful. He set it up great. He touched the legs, picked the dude up. Like, it was a beautiful takedown instantly. And then they got back to the feet. He had no problem swinging. Ultimately got the guillotine. So Tresean Shore might be really good. We don't know yet. I haven't seen enough fighting. I haven't seen enough back and forth. I mean, he's 5-2 now. Those 2 losses, the Brian Battle loss is good, but I mean, not every loss he has is good. But he did wrestle. Not had a nice takedown. Had no problem bombing away. Won by guillotine. I guess we have to assume that for now, he's pretty good. For him to talk about, I'm going to be a 2-division champ, that's a little extreme. Let's get a couple more wins and see what happens. Then we had Stamann Blackshear. I had a 3-leg parlay that hit. It had Stamann, Gillian, and Carlos. I don't usually do 3-leg parlays. I hate extending beyond a certain point. I'm a conservative gambler. I'm a conservative bettor. The reason the ROI is so absolutely spectacular, the reason we're winning money week in and week out is because I'm conservative. I'm not shooting for the stars. So a 3-leg parlay for me is like, I got to be pretty confident and it has to be because I need value, right? That parlay wouldn't have been very good. So I had to add Stamann Blackshear. I didn't love it. I was a little nervous because on paper, Cody Stamann, college wrestler, Golden Gloves boxing champion. And Stamann Blackshear was just unconscious in like 10 seconds in his last fight. So I was a little nervous coming into this. And early, it was a little nerve-wracking because Cody Stamann closed that distance really well. Landed clean in a couple of the inside the pocket exchanges. But Stamann kept his composure, started to work that reach. He was significantly taller, started to work that reach, started to have more success. And when it got on the ground, it wasn't even close. But this is a little deceiving. It's not as if Stamann shot a takedown. There were no takedowns in this fight. He dropped this fool. Dropped him. Stamann Blackshear looked absolutely spectacular in this win. And I'm telling you, Cody's not bad. Golden Gloves boxing champion, college wrestler. He's a pretty tough dude. The way he survived the drop was nuts. Was absolutely nuts. So Stamann Blackshear, this was an incredible win. He has a twister win. This was an incredible win. And yes, he was just sparked by Montel Jackson, but that's Montel Quick Jackson. The guy hits hard as shit. Stamann Blackshear looked absolutely fantastic. This was the only part of that parlay I was nervous about when I placed it. When I was watching live, Gillian Robertson made me a little nervous. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we had Charlie Radtke versus Matt Semelsberger. I'm probably going to talk about this fight longer than it lasted. Charlie Radtke came out, no problem swinging to leather, landed clean, and that was the end of the fight. It wasn't that long ago that Matt Semelsberger had an iron chin and would come forward and he was all heart, all dog. Was a tough outing for anybody. And that's just done. It's just done. I don't know when that turn happened. I don't know how that happened. But Matt Semelsberger is done. That's it. I mean, that's the end of his career, at least right now. The problem in this sport is if you hit a skid like this, they got to cut you. They can't just build you back up when you got 3-4 losses in a row. But the other problem is when your chin is gone, it is gone. I can only think of 1 or 2 people that have ever had a bad chin and then it somehow recovered. I'll give you 2 examples. Andrei Arlovsky is one. He had a good chin. Then he got later in his career, that chin was absolutely gone. He was getting knocked out left and right. Then all of a sudden, one day, the chin was just back out of nowhere. You could blame it on steroids if you want, but I don't think it was steroids. And then Glover Teixeira is another good example. Great chin, no problem. Then he gets knocked out by Gustafsson. He got knocked out by Rumble Johnson. All of a sudden, that chin's on the way down. And then he came back, and the chin was there. And Glover 100% has nothing to do with PEDs. Nothing. So maybe Matt Semelsberger will have one of those weird roller coasters where had a great chin is gone, and maybe it'll work its way back in a little bit. But, I mean, this is a couple of knockouts. And Charlie Radtke, yes, he has incredible power in his hands, but let's look at this picture. What does that say in his forearm? It says, Jiu-Jitsu for life. He is a grappler. He's a grappler. And we haven't seen that in the UFC, really. Because in UFC, he's found his power and he's winning like that. But he is a grappler. Charlie Radtke might be a very good fighter. Yeah, he got smoked by Carlos Prates, but we just saw that main event. We know how good Carlos Prates is now. So all of a sudden, Charlie Radtke is a guy that we should keep an eye on. He's always fun on the microphone. Seems like a genuine dude. He has said some wild shit. You could hate him for it, and I would totally understand. But inside that cage, Charlie Radtke is a good time, and he's a lot of fun to watch. Then we had Elizeu Zaleski taking on Zach Scroggin. This was the second half of the safety parlay. And thank God, I almost did lady overs. And I wasn't going to do the Gillian Robertson over. I might have done the Denise Gomes Karolina over. So then that would have hit. But when Elizeu got a new opponent, I immediately did the research. I watched the tape and I saw Zach Scroggin. The dude sucks. Like, he's not UFC ready. 7-0, comes in here undefeated. He was not UFC ready, and that was obvious. If you watch the DraftKings video, let me walk you through our schedule very quickly. Every Sunday morning, you will get a video from me and only me, this beautiful face sitting here looking exactly like Ben Affleck, breaking down whatever the next card is. Then on Tuesdays, Jacob and I are live on the internet, breaking down that same card. Me and Jacob. Then on Thursdays or Fridays, depending on the week, I break down the card again, but with a DraftKings fantasy hat on. Not literally, figuratively. We break it down with the DraftKings fantasy in mind. Who should or should not be in your lineup. Come that video, we always have changes. A new fight dropped, a new opponent, we added something. So in that video, I broke down Scroggin and his skills. Or in this case, a lack thereof. The dude stands straight up in the air, but his head is tilted backwards, easily taken down, easily hit in the face. The guy sucks. The only thing that worried me here was Elizeu Zaleski's old, but this dude was training for Nicholas Dalby. And then they gave him this kid who sucks. Listen, not everybody, people are going to suck. The UFC is the pinnacle of this sport. It's the highest level. It's supposed to be the NFL of the sport, right? We all know plenty of really good high school football players, really good college football players that just quite couldn't cut it in the NFL. Couldn't even get there to begin with, or if they did, they didn't last long. And that's what MMA is supposed to be. That's what UFC is supposed to be. So when somebody like Zach Scroggin, a good regional guy, undefeated, shows up and gets his ass kicked by a journeyman 37-year-old, it's like, yeah, no, you're just not. You are not an elite fighter. You're not one of the best in the world. Is what it is. That's what's supposed to happen. Elizeu Zaleski came in here, sparked this absolute nerd, cashed that safety parlay. And then this kind of sucked the air out of the room. Denise Gomes and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Wasn't the most boring fight we've ever seen. Wasn't the best one either. Every fight up until this point was a finish. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finishes in a row. And then we just got Denise Gomes moving forward, just just bombing overhands. And it was an interesting fight to watch because Denise was just bombing. That's it. She was just bombing. Nothing else. Just throwing bombs and haymakers. And Karolina was sort of reacting, eating a lot of them. But there were times, and Karolina is supposed to be a high-level kickboxer. She was a high-level kickboxer 8 years ago when she fought for the title. But in this fight, we really only saw her work in combinations and have some exchanges like, I don't know, maybe a full minute in a 15-minute fight. And when she was thrown in combination, they looked okay. But even her, supposed to be a technical kickboxer, she was widening. Her arms were up and looping. And she's just a shell of herself. She had a 4-fight win streak. She is now on a 2-fight skid. And this is probably the end. And this is familiar to her because she had a nice win streak and then a 4-fight skid. And then she turned it around, made some adjustments. But it's just age at this point. She's a little too slow. And you get somebody like Denise Gomes, who's strong, fast, young. Even if you are better than her. In this, I would argue that Karolina is the better fighter. Even if you are better than the stronger, faster, younger fighter, it's going to be really hard to win those fights. So it sucks. But Denise Gomes won this fight. Was it exciting? No, not really. But it didn't blow either. Now this was an exciting fight. Mansur Abdul-Malik smoked Dusko Todorovic. Smoked him. Huge power in his hands. And the best part is he's a Division I wrestler that didn't really need to wrestle. Where we saw the Division I wrestling is after he dropped Dusko and they end up on the ground, they end up in scrambles. He's winning the scrambles. He's got good control on top. Dusko was searching for a knee bar, heel hook. And it's always nerve-wracking, right? I had Abdul in a parlay. Abdul-Malik, it's his last name, not his first name. I had him in a parlay. So anytime you have money, everything's a little more exaggerated, a little more nerve-wracking. And I was watching that, and it was a little nervous. Like, oh my God, I don't like the way his leg is bent. But the reality is he was calm. He was composed. This is a guy that only had 6 fights when he stepped into this cage. And he was calm. He was composed. Landed with clean power. He looked absolutely fantastic. And obviously the commentating team is talking about he's a gym hero, and everybody told this guy's the next big thing. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. We do need to be careful. We do need to be careful because this is the exact type of guy that is supposed to be amazing, and then all of a sudden is going to get smoked. I don't see that happening. Division I wrestler, big, huge power in his hands. My one and only concern right now, that dude was gassing. He was breathing heavy, real heavy. And this fight ended in the first round, and he started breathing with his mouth open. But first UFC fight, lots of nerves, lots of stuff going on. He looked great, smoked Dusko, did exactly what he was supposed to do. Then we had Gillian Robertson taking on Luana Pinheiro. Jacob had a -3.5. If you don't know what that is, you're selling points. You're betting the opposite of the spread. So +3.5 we talk about all the time is you get an underdog that you think can win a round on the scorecards. You bought some points, you bought the spread, and you're good if it's a close fight. In this case, Jacob sold some points to get better value. And the only reason it hit is there was a random 10-8 round thrown in the mix on one of the judges, and it saved the day for Jakey Boy. Because this fight was closer than it should have been. First round was pretty straightforward. Gillian immediately comes forward, gets a couple of half takedowns, plenty of control time, is controlling Luana the entire time, gets her to the ground. Luana will pop back up, and then Gillian's still on her hips, on her back, gets her to the ground, that whole thing. But the second round, Luana Pinheiro had footwork, was defending really well, circling out really well, was clearly the much better striker throwing with power. And then third round was this, right? Gillian ended up getting it to the ground, but she had to go through some shit to get there. Gillian Robertson is a future fade. And she was down on herself in the post-fight interview, talking, I'm should be finishing people. And yes, she has the all-time most amount of finishes, I think in women's MMA, women's UFC. Definitely this division, but I think it's all women. I could be wrong. But so she is the finish queen. She has more finishes than anybody. So I can understand being down on yourself. But the problem is she's not really evolving. When I broke this fight down, I said anybody with some pretty good takedown defense and good striking can beat Gillian Robertson. And Luana Pinheiro had okay takedown defense and good striking, and she had some real success. I need Gillian to be training wrestling nonstop. The jiu-jitsu is there. The control is there. Train wrestling nonstop. Shoot real takedowns. To have that really tight body lock against the cage and struggle to get it to the ground, I'm a lifelong wrestler. I trained today. And to watch her have that body lock from back and then just trying to pull her over her leg is one of the most frustrating things in the world. There are so many takedowns from there. The problem with people like Gillian is that she is good, right? She is talented. She is good. But she's not training at the right place. And yes, she's working with Din Thomas, and Din Thomas is fantastic. But who are her training partners? Does she have a wrestling beast in the room? Are there multiple wrestling beasts in the room? Are they doing shark drills? Is she the best grappler in that room? I hope she's not. You should never be the best at anything in the room that you're training in. And I do fear somebody like Gillian is going to peak and not quite achieve the success that she could or should, because she's not necessarily getting the looks that she should be getting. She's definitely a future fade. She did win this fight. All the bets cashed because I had her in a parlay. But I was worried about it because once Luana started dancing around that second round, not getting taken down, landing the cleaner strikes, it was definitely nerve-wracking. And then we had Gaston Bolanos taking on Cortavius Ramius. This is the only underdog that won. Gaston was the only underdog that won. And what did I say? When I broke this fight down, I said, I cannot bet on this fight. We have seen Cortavius unconscious on this floor, in this octagon. He was on the Contender Series, got knocked out in under a minute, and we knew how hard Gaston hit. He was a professional kickboxer. Has multiple spinning back elbow knockouts. So I said, I can't bet on this fight. And thank God I didn't bet on this fight, because Cortavius kind of shit the bed. The worst part about it is it wasn't necessarily the striking. Gaston Bolanos beat him with the grappling as well. Was defending the takedowns. Was getting off the cage. Was scrambling better. Look at this ridiculous scramble. Look at this position that they're in. This is absurd. This is absurd. It's absurd. You're fighting a professional kickboxer and this is how you end up on the ground? He's just not ready yet. Cortavius Ramius is not is not ready for the UFC. I don't know if he ever will be. This isn't quite the it's okay to suck speech that Scroggin got, or Scroggin. But he's definitely not ready yet. And Gaston has a whole long career in combat sports, but just, you either needed to dominate the grappling or have more success striking. He didn't do either one of those things. And Gaston just showed us that he's tough. Showed us that he has the face and the name of a Disney prince. And he made it happen. Ramius was not his Cinderella. So great fight for Gaston. Made it happen, and these elbows were awesome. Laying on his back, just pa-pa. Good for him. And then we had Reinier de Rider taking on Gerald Meerschaert. And I didn't see the official scorecards. I probably should look that up. But I thought it was 1-1 going into the third. That's what it felt like to me. But after Reinier de Rider submitted Gerald Meerschaert, he said, I just pulled off a Gerald Meerschaert, basically meaning I was losing this fight, and then I got the submission. I have the scorecard in front of me right now, and I was correct. It was 1-1 going into the third, and he was winning that third. So he was going to win a decision, even if he didn't get the finish, but he did get the finish. And this picture is a little deceiving because the left-hand side of this picture makes it look like Reinier de Rider dropped Gerald Meerschaert and then submitted him. These are different rounds. He dropped him in the first, had him in a bad way. And then in the second round, he's getting out grappled. Bit of a jiu-jitsu nerd about it. In the third round, he also had some jiu-jitsu nerd bullshit, but ultimately pulled off the submission. And when we say jiu-jitsu nerd here, we're talking about people who are like butt scooting and stuff like that. So Reinier de Rider isn't quite a jiu-jitsu nerd. He shot real takedowns. He stood there and he banged. He dropped Gerald Meerschaert. But there were some exchanges on the ground where it's like, what in God's name are you doing? And he's a better grappler than I'll ever be. I've been doing this for 20 years. I got my blue belt in 2004. And he will run circles around me without question. Maybe I could take him down. His takedowns look like shit. But there were times where it's like, dude, you know this is a fist fight, right? This is not a this is a fist fight. You know this is a fist fight? And this isn't a grappling match? What are you doing stepping over the head like that? What are you doing? You're treating this like a grappling match, and it isn't. And that type of stuff is going to be a problem for him in the future. Depending on who he fights in this division, that's going to be a problem for him. Couple of takeaways. He was in a parlay. I had him and Mansur Abdul-Malik in a parlay. 2 UFC newcomers I was pretty confident in. They both got it done. They both got it done by finish. So I was confident in him coming into this. I am less confident in him now. I felt like this should have been the first round. Giving up the second round the way he did was kind of tough. The third round, I thought he was winning, but a couple of weird, sloppy grappling exchanges. He is too willing to engage in sloppy jiu-jitsu off his back when he should be creating scrambles and getting the hell out of there. This is a fight in a cage. It's not a jiu-jitsu match. So we got to see a little more of him. This is his UFC debut, but he's a little too hittable and he's a little too willing to hang out on the ground in bad positions. Those are my two big takeaways for him. We'll see who they match him up with next. Like, give him Edmund Shabazi and I'll pick him, right? But if you start giving him Joe Pyfers, I can't stand that fraud from Philly, dude, Joe might knock his dumb ass out. Sean Brady, I mean, Reinier is very hittable, and he is very willing to hang out in bad positions on the ground. But he won this fight, made us a couple buccarinos. And then we had the main event of it. This is a cold-ass picture. This is a vertical picture, but we're zoomed in. This is Neil Magny, like this, on the ground, with only 10 seconds left on the round. 10 seconds left in the first round. And Carlos Prates walking away. This was a great fight. And maybe not great fight, but we learned a lot in this fight. Neil Magny's high IQ. He's fought some of the best people on the planet. He's been doing it for a very long time. So Neil Magny had the proper game plan. Let me come forward, get this dangerous animal against the cage so he can't blow through me. Great game plan. Makes sense. You were just knocked out in your last fight. Close the distance, get Carlos against the cage. But what happened? Carlos ended up with the takedown. Carlos ended up on top. Carlos's takedown defense against the cage was great. His takedown defense in the middle of the octagon was great. Carlos Prates' hands, we knew the hands were good. But now we know his takedown defense is very good. His hips are very good. This guy is fantastic. He also smokes Marlboro Reds. This guy is an animal. We knew he was going to knock out Neil Magny, and so did the betting odds. Like, this wasn't news to anybody. But the most shocking thing to me was how well he defended the takedowns. It would be one thing if he just sort of pushed Neil off, circled, knocked him out early. But he ended up against the cage. He had his leg clean in the air. Neil Magny had a full single picked up. And Carlos defended the whole thing. When they were against the cage fighting for position, Carlos won that exchange, ended up on top. Carlos Prates is good. And I hope the UFC does not rush him. I hope they don't rush him. This is a weight class that needs a little juice. There's a couple interesting fights at this weight class. Don't get me wrong. It's not 185. There's a couple interesting fights at this weight class, but it needs a little juice. And Carlos Prates could be a guy that we could be talking about. So don't rush him. Give him another couple of fights before we start talking about top 5, top whatever the hell. Carlos Prates is an absolute animal. Overall, this was a very good card, and it ended early, which I absolutely love. Here's another look at those bets. And I'm showing you these because I'm going to tell you to go to my website and sign up. It's $10 a month. You're going to get all of our picks, all of our bets, the artificial intelligence, every tool that we have. It's freaking $10 a month. It is quite literally the best offering on the planet. Week in and week out, we are dominating. We are putting up winning bets every single freaking week. And before you say, oh, this was an easy card, was it? Go check Twitter. Check all those idiots and tell me if this was an easy card. WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member. It's $10 for an entire month. You are going to get copy-paste bets if that's what you're into. If you like to do your own research as well, we coded a tool from scratch. It is called the Data Analyzer. It has every single fight built out for every single event on the calendar. You go to the event, you pick your fighter. All the data will populate. You can then add filters. Say, let me see how many takedowns this person gets in decision wins. You can just keep adding filters and stack them. And then you'll get this plot chart at the bottom. This plot chart, every single dot on that chart is one of their fights. And you can click on the dot and the video of the fight will pop up and you can watch the actual fights. Every data point you could ever want. We also have a tool called the Line Movement Tracker. This is going to give you the opening odds, the current odds, the win probability, the line movement for every fighter on every card. You're going to get the Prop Hunter, a curated set of data specifically designed to help you find prop bets. You're going to get the DraftKings Optimizer. This is preloaded with the best DraftKings ownership projections on the planet. And you're going to get Artem. He just picked the perfect card. UFC Vegas 100, he picked a perfect card, including Gaston Bolanos and an artificial intelligence. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member. $10 a freaking month. UFC 309 is next week.